just to keep with the flow, let me make a couple of comments about the concentration law. The first is an empirical, my understanding of the empirics of the results from a hallway discussion with a colleague of mine, Yishai Yefe, who's our resident and global expert on corporate groups. And that is that a lot of the positions of these groups have been replaced by institutional investors. And so what we're getting instead is potentially, well, there's one potential effect is that we get agency control problems. If these institutional investors are not involved, or just sort of passive investors, and that gives managers more control on the problems that we know that come with that. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the other possibility is that the institutional investors are not passive, and that they act in concerted effort, whatever the term is, with each other, and taking into account their holdings in various firms within markets, which is something that Azar et al. Have been looking at in the United States. And then we're basically back in the same position that we were before. So that remains to be seen. The other comment I would make on the concentration law is that there is a criticism that is sometimes raised that is likely to chill investment. The notion is that there's some kind of home advantage that large local investors have. And local can be living in LA, but you grew up in Israel, and the culture, the language, you have family, who's important and so forth. And that allows them to operate at lower cost. There's some sort of, what that might be an efficiency. That might be some kind of market power through collusion with your friends, and that might be, greater ability of corruption. Whatever it is, you keep those players out of the game, and that means that your supply of capital is going to be less. Okay, there's foreign capital, but foreign capital is not as good at operating in the Israeli economy, and they're going to demand a higher rate of return. Now, so then the question is, the first question is, what is the source of this advantage? Is it a bad source? Is it market power or corruption, or is it a good source? Is it efficiency? And of course, efficiency can also lead to greater market power and so forth. And so it would be good to know that we get a sense of that. And the next insight is it's going to be important to know whether we're talking about industries here that are mature industries that don't require a lot of additional investment, or growing industries that do, and because own capital is cheaper than capital from outside, from bank finance capital, let's say, there's going to be a greater harm. This chilling effect is going to be more damaging in that latter case. So I think these are important things to keep in mind. How much more? I have enough time. So actually, what I really want to talk about, I want to go back to my favorite part of this conference so far, and that was Hal Varian's reading of the dead. So that was a long list of companies that were once quite prominent and dominant in their, seemingly dominant in their market, that were dislodged by some other company, typically the company that we know today and that is dominant today. So it was a very long list. I'd love to have it, but it was very, very quickly. And all I sort of remember is there was Nokia was in there, and my favorite MySpace, and some other things, probably Atari. I don't know. So I'd like to criticize it. Not that I don't see the value in the list, but it's always fun to be on the other side and important to present the other side. So 3 points. First point, so first of all, what was the context? I don't quite remember the context of the comment. It was over 24 hours ago. But I think the sort of the argument is, hey, the big five and these other firms that have 95% of the market, they're operating in a more competitive environment than we think. There's always this reasonable fear of being overturned, and so we should expect them to be acting in a way that's sort of more competitive because of this more competitive environment. So my first point is a conceptual point. Firms that don't face the fear of entry don't do all sorts of bad things. There's no reason to do it, right? So we know in some, someone mentioned Capital. So Capital has written about this recently and talking about market power, 100% market power, 100% monopoly, no fear of entry. You don't need to exclude. There's nothing to exclude, right? It's actually the firms that have substantial market power but still face a threat of entry that are going to have the incentive to do all sorts of bad things. And that's something that's inherent in all the economic theory of entry deterrence. And we also have empirical evidence of that in entry deterrence, not necessarily abuse. As an example, the Ellison and Fisher-Ellison, Ellison-Fisher, on the pharmaceutical industry, where we see that pharma firms advertise the most when their patents are running up. Not at the beginning. No need to advertise. Where you need to advertise is when you're really in fear of entry, and presumably that goes over to abuse of dominance as well. Second point is a historical point. We do know quite a bit about the dynamics of firm behavior. Maybe not in the detail that Chaim would like, let's say, but we know of a phenomenon called shakeout. And this has been documented for a large range of products, from television sets to penicillin, to its most famous example, tires, and just a whole list. What happens in shakeout? What happens in shakeout is that you can kind of characterize the firm history by three periods. An initial period in which there's a lot of entry. You've got to have entry at the beginning, right? And that's followed by a great increase in exit. And firm numbers just plummet. And then the third period is a period of stability where you have neither entry and exit, and firms are secure in their place in the market. There's a number of explanations that have been given for this phenomenon that can involve learning, it can involve selection on productive ability or innovation, or the issue of a dominant design where consumers don't really know what they want until it emerges. But all these possible mechanisms surely exist for these new economy firms as well, as does economies of scale, which, whether they're in these theories or not, always play an important role in shakeout. Okay, so as to the question about whether this phenomenon of shakeout is relevant for the new economy, and I remind you what Aaron said the other day, that the new economy firms or industries are characterized by extremely high economies of scale on the supply side, and to the extent that they're network goods, also on the demand side. So to the extent that economies of scale is important in shakeout, we ought to be expecting to see shakeout in these industries as well. How does this relate to this? The way I see it is you had shakeout in the beginning in these industries. That was the shakeout. Okay, MySpace got knocked out, Atari got knocked out, and it could very well be, at least the possibility theorem, as they say, that we're in the period of stability right now. Third and final comment, and if I've spoken too long, just I'm happy not to talk anymore. The third issue is that I think, to the extent that we're talking about network products, dislodging, let's say, Facebook is a very different story from dislodging MySpace. If you're dislodging Facebook, you're replacing a network that covers, essentially the whole potential network. So I'm not on Facebook, but how many people are like me? But MySpace, the vast majority of people who would eventually be on Facebook were not on MySpace, okay? And surely it's got to be easier to dislodge a nation network than a mature network. So what was, I think, is not necessarily what's going to be. Doesn't mean that I think that these firms are there forever. There's other mechanisms that limit the lifetime of firms. But it might very well be that what happened in the past doesn't speak to the potential competitive threats under which the firms are operating today.